Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horse is kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burning Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Welcome back to another riveting episode I got for you today. We're going to go a little more in the political world, and and I'm talking to a city fella, and don't run away. He's a really cool guy. He's really interesting. I've heard him through a lot of the Libertarian podcast. He twice ran for governor of New York, I believe, on the Libertarian ticket, and quite honestly had some of the better ideas, more intriguing, compelling ideas for the age-old question that us libertarians get asked: who will build the roads? And you may have seen him on Joe Rogan as well. I'd listened to him several times before he went on Rogan, but really interesting guy. Got to meet him in person at Freedom Fest there in Memphis, and glad to have you on the Burning Daylight podcast, Larry.
Thank you for having me. In fact, we use Burning Daylight in the Marine Corps too. When I was in the Marine Corps, we'd be like, yeah, we got to get some stuff done with Burning Daylight. Absolutely. Yep. We use that phrase often. Yes.
It's the classic old rancher, cow boss, tyrant of a farmer that all rural people worked for, whether it be their dad, grandpa, or just, the right. Boss.
Right.
Yeah. Get your ass in gear.
You'd be amazed how many Marines, particularly back in the day when I joined, how many came from rural areas. I remember one of the things I learned being a city kid is when I went to boot camp, I met people who I would have never met before. Like I met people who didn't wear shoes. Like they didn't mind being outside without their shoes on. I'm from the city. You don't go outside without your shoes on. Like you don't do that. That's not a thing you do, right? You don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you very rarely wear, you don't want to wear sandals down the streets of New York either. I mean, it's
exactly, yes.
It's kind of gross.
So, absolutely. I remember, joining the Marine Corps was one of my first times meeting people who weren't like me, which was very great. I enjoyed that tremendously. It was very good. And crossing New York State, as you said, as I ran for governor twice, I met, I always liked upstate New York, because when I was a kid, that's where my family and I would go to kind of, go fishing, or we go up there to Bear Mountain to go, to sit out there in a camper or something. Or we drove, for those who don't know New York State, it's a very wide state that has Niagara Falls on one side and New York City on the other, right? So if you want to go to Niagara Falls, you drive across the entire state, right? We have the Finger Lakes. We have a lot of wealthy people who live in New York City have a second home, or used to, not as much now, used to have a second home someplace upstate New York for their vacation home, because the state upstate is so beautiful.
Well, and it's got that upstate area's got you've got a rich agricultural tradition, but you also have a thriving arts community. The band made their home up in upstate New York.
There are two parts of upstate when it comes to that, right? The Hudson Valley, which is right above New York City. That is just arts like there's no tomorrow. Arts, antiques, music festivals. Woodstock was there, right? Everything you could. That's the Hudson Valley as you go straight up from New York City. But then when you head out towards the west, that's farmland. Like there's no tomorrow. New York has historically, and I mean for the past 200 to 300 years, been good on three things: finance, farming, innovation. And we have blown all three of those away. We are screwing it up like there's no tomorrow. We're losing our finance to Miami and to San Francisco. We're losing our farming because we're destroying all small farmers. Instead, we're using the big farmers buying stuff up. We even screwed up our cannabis legalization to screw over small farmers. And our innovation's gone because we're throwing out anything new. We don't want anything new. We only want old money in New York. And it's just not working anymore. Innovation's going someplace else also. Heavily to Texas, believe it or not. Texas is taking a lot of innovation Some Florida, but heavily Texas is taking our innovation. Or worse, other countries are even taking our innovation. Used to be Eastern Europe until the Russia-Ukraine war. That slowed that down. But now also Israel, massive innovation. So you're finding a lot of it over there.
It's interesting how you speak of going overseas. In the Western U.S., really the Western U.S. has had a hard time with water since the very beginning.
Yes,
it's a very scarce resource, but each state set up laws that were pretty good on defining water rights, usage, and it's always hard to project that in the future with a natural resource because weather's very fickle. But we have a situation where, say Vegas and Phoenix in particular, huge metropolitan areas,
right
in the middle of a damn desert, where people are typically not supposed to live. And innovation made it possible, which is awesome. But once you hit the boundaries of a finite resource such as water, there's only one thing that can happen, and that's where people eventually move out because you can't build if you don't have water to.
Well, let me bring up two different issues here. One of them is when it comes to water, the East doesn't understand this at all because we have tons of water here in the East, tons of it.
Yeah,
rain's great, lots of rivers, lots of lakes. Water is usually not our problem here. Sometimes fresh water getting into certain areas sometimes is, and that's often because of our screw-ups of an infrastructure. But amount of water, we're good in the East, right? I think we're good in the East. But there's something someone told me many years ago, which I never forgot. He said, if you have unlimited water, you have unlimited energy. If you have unlimited energy, you have unlimited water. They go together.
Yeah.
So why do I bring this up? Because we are screwing up in this country by not adopting nuclear energy. Nuclear energy would absolutely allow for us to have clean, fresh water. Nuclear energy, desalination plants, nuclear energy, creating plants that take water out of the atmosphere. I mean, you could create water if you use one of the best energy sources we have on the planet, which is nuclear energy. And we're not using it. And in reality, it'll take time, obviously. It's not a tomorrow fix, but it is a fix for our water problem. Imagine if you could put a desalination plant, 2 or 3 of them in California.
Oh, it'd be
5 or 6 of them in California.
Yeah.
Oh my God, right? It would solve California's water problem. And if you'd solve California's water problem, you would really help out almost everybody else's water problem.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure what happened with my camera here, but I'll can you still hear me okay?
I hear you, but I think your camera is being used by some other app.
Yeah, it looks like I'm not sure.
Did somebody call you or something, or someone did something like that?
I think it just it glitched out on me, so I'm gonna restart it.
I have the show to myself now. Yes, if you create nuclear power, you can absolutely create desalination plants and or other types of factories that can pull even water out of the atmosphere in theory, or even transfer water. We have tons of water here in the East. Imagine if a nuclear power plant that could just pump the water to the West. It wouldn't matter. You could also do it that way, either way. So without question, more energy will solve the water problems, but we don't want to do it. Why? Government intervention, worries and concerns, not in my backyard. All of those things are the problems that we have. But if we instead realize, wait a minute, we have to use what's called Gen 4 nuclear energy. Gen 4 is a special type of nuclear energy that in reality, there is literally zero chance of a meltdown. No chance of a meltdown whatsoever. That's the better type of nuclear energy. It's Gen 4 nuclear energy.
Well, and kind of, I guess, tying back to one of my points, and the way they've screwed it up is rather than nuclear energy and taking water from the ocean and whatnot. No, instead they like there's a company that's owned exclusively by Saudi Arabia that's growing alfalfa in the desert, sucking the water table dry, and then exporting the alfalfa to feed Saudi Arabian dairy cows in Saudi Arabia. And you're just like,
yep,
it's so dumb. It's so dumb. Yep. And it becomes, it's because of all the ties between the Saudis and our government. That's one of That's one thing where Trump supporters really don't want to. They try not to pay attention to the Saudi connection. Like that guy made a lot of money off of Saudi Arabia, and
Yeah, but there's an issue that most people don't get. Why every single president kisses the Saudis' butt, right?
Mhm.
It's not because they like the Saudis. That's not the issue, right? That's not the reason. The reason is the petrodollar. Like that's the reason. The reason is the Saudis have agreed to sell their oil, which is the most in the world right now, using dollars, which means other people have to buy dollars, and dollars become the reserve currency. So we keep kissing their butt so we can keep our fiat currency floating. That's the reason
exactly
why.
Right.
And we'd rather not invade Saudi Arabia, which would have to be our only other option, right? And we don't want to go do that. That would be a big problem. So we just kiss their butt, give them what they want. They keep forcing people to buy dollars, and this keeps floating our massive debt. That's just our massive Ponzi scheme that is our dollar.
Yeah, and if we were to invade Saudi Arabia, I can't even imagine what the mess would be after that. Like
Terrible
Israel might not exist afterwards, you know. Like it'd be bad.
Israel's fine. I'm not worried about Israel. Why are you worried about Israel? Israel has the biggest economy in the Middle East. It has the biggest military in the Middle East. It's one of the most stable countries in the Middle East, and it's got nuclear weapons. Israel will be fine.
That's true. I'm not worried about Israel personally. I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to like how all those chips would fall if we invaded Saudi Arabia. Because I can't imagine that it would just
nothing but bad.
It couldn't be just a strictly a U.S. Saudi deal. No, all those other neighboring countries they're gonna join one way or the other, and it's gonna be a mess.
If we had to invade Saudi Arabia, if that was please, I hope I'm not giving anyone ideas. It would be a horrible idea. Let's not do. But if we ever did, that's the end of America, and I mean that because our economy would immediately collapse. We'd lose the petrodollar. Every single Muslim country in the world would say, "How dare you attack our holy land of Mecca?" So you'd have every Muslim country in the world against us, with the exception of maybe probably even the Iranians, and they hate the Saudis. Maybe even them, right? So we'd have no allies anywhere. Oh my God, it would be terrible. I mean, nothing but bad. This is why we don't want to do it. So not that I want us to kiss the Saudis' butt. I think the petrodollar is a bad idea, but I'm just saying I understand why they do it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I understand why, even though I disagree.
Yeah, no, 100%. But it's pretty wild how thick that corruption is across the board with the Saudis. And yeah, under the system that we live in, it's kind of necessary because, like you said, you can't.
And most people don't get it, right? And that's the hardest part. Now, I'm going to use 4 different presidents, so whatever your left-right bias of any listener might be, you'll get it. Look at the last 4 presidents, not including Biden. Look at Trump, Obama, Bush, and Clinton. Now, you have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans in those 4. Both cases, when it came to Trump and Obama, left and right, both of them struggled their first years, right? Trump's policies and some of his, I know a lot of people don't like Trump. I'm just saying his foreign policies were not bad foreign policies, but all of them were delayed by at least 1 or 2 years. Obama, all of his stuff was also delayed 1 or 2 years. But look at someone like Bush and Clinton, again, left and right. Both of them had very good first terms. Why?
Yeah.
Bush and Clinton were both governors. They already knew how the system worked. They walked into the presidency understanding the system. Obama and Trump were not governors. They didn't know how this worked. They walked in thinking, okay, I can do things. And the deep state said, no, son, that's not how this works.
Yeah,
We're the deep state.
exactly.
Let me explain some things to you. Let me explain a couple things to you. And what happened is it delayed all of them in getting their things off the ground. Because now you walk in, the deep state says, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was right. Everyone in the deep state is telling me that I'm wrong. You begin to doubt yourself, change your system, change your plans. Now, that's why I say that if you look at Trump and Obama, both of their first years were slowed. Obama's plans didn't go how he planned it, neither did Trump's.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It turns out like you, as much as you want a guy that's completely outside the system, you still want that guy to know how the system works.
Or at least you want them to understand that the deep state's a real thing.
Right.
And most people still to this day think the deep state's not a real thing. When you say it, they're like, well, no, come on, that's not. I'm like, no. There are literally tens of thousands of people who are making their living, who are paying their bills, who are making their entire life based upon the deep state. They're not just going to walk away from that, right? When we're talking about, and this is kind of national news, but we're talking about this, I'll stay in this world if you want. People ask me, Larry, how do you end the military-industrial complex? How do you stop all the bombing and all of the war hawks? And I said, you have to realize something. The military-industrial complex isn't innately evil. It's innately apathetic. It doesn't care. The complex wants to sell high equipment at a good price to make money. If that equipment happens to kill people, okay. If it doesn't, also okay. They don't care if it kills people. They don't care if it bombs people. They just
want you to buy it.
Bingo, they want you to buy it. So how do you stop it? You can't go, we're going to shut down all the bases. And no. You're going to wind up, the CIA is going to decide that you don't like your life that much all of a sudden. That's what's going to happen. Right?
JFK,
I'm not even joking.
Right before he got assassinated, I don't know how the timeline exactly was before he got assassinated, it was between the Bay of Pigs and the bullet. He said, I wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the wind. And turns out he didn't like his life that much either.
That's exactly right. So how do you fix that while still staying above ground? How do you do that? Right? Well, you can. And it's a thing that's actually non-libertarian, which makes some libertarians upset. But there's a part that's libertarian and a part that's not. Let me give you the libertarian part. The first thing you do is, as you begin to stop all the hot wars, you do a second thing. Every single country that we are right now embargoing or sanctioning, we lift all the embargoes and all the sanctions to. All of them. So anyone can now trade and or purchase or buy or. You then take the military-industrial complex contractors and you give them a 2 to 3 to 5, depending on how you negotiate, sweet right of first refusal deals for contracts in those countries. That is not libertarian at all. That's not free market. That is not free market. I'm being open. That's not free market. However, these military-industrial contractors, they don't know how to compete because they don't now. They just buy up politicians at whatever price they want. They sell what they want to ongoing wars. So they're not going to all of a sudden lose those billions of dollars. Okay, here's a 5-year, 3-year, whatever deal where you can make a bunch of money in these countries before everybody else can. And then we'll compete afterwards. We'll compete years later. You'll get the right of first refusal. You'll get the first, start. You get an advantage in these countries. That is not libertarian. That is not free market, but it's the only way I can see of shutting down a military-industrial complex, because these companies don't want to or not want to kill people. They want to sell stuff at a high profit. If I give them a second way of doing it, they're more apt to do it, even though that's not libertarian.
Well, and it kind of goes on the world stage. It goes back to the, an armed society is a polite society as well. And had Ukraine had their own defenses beforehand, NATO, and I'm not wanting them in NATO, but say they had NATO style weaponry and they were able to adequately defend themselves, Russia's going to be a lot more hesitant to invade. Same way, like if Yemen had a powerful defense, like say Iran has, the Saudis wouldn't be carrying on this war for as long as they had either. And it's it's not a libertarian solution on any front there, but it seems like a practical one, And
what do you mean by that?
Well,
I think letting people arm themselves is libertarian. How's that not libertarian? That sounds libertarian to me.
That part, I think so. But it also goes back to the military industrial complex being kind of this big evil thing. But also, as you said, it's not necessarily evil. It's just they just want to sell weapons.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, as long as they're selling things, we as they should be selling things on the open market like anybody else does. Our military industrial complex allows them to not compete. Yeah. And that's my point, right? They're not, it's not a free market. If it was a free market and they're selling weapons, okay, sell weapons. But our current system, this is not a free market. It's the American government deciding where to fight and then who to buy weapons from.
Mm-hmm.
And then the companies just bribe the officials so that they give them the contracts. That's not a free market. What I'm saying is open it up to a free market. I don't mind you buying or selling weapons as you see fit, but you shouldn't be buying the weapons, because what most people don't get, and I'll go one step further, a lot of foreign aid is people are against. It's just a jobs program. So what happens in country A, we decide to give country A $50 billion in foreign aid. Okay, great. It's $50 billion. They take $10 billion and they pay off all their local cronies, all their local warlords. And then they take $40 billion and they buy weapons from us. So we basically, it's just a jobs program.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I accept that as true. If you want to get rid of the foreign aid, I agree. But then let these people sell into other countries so we don't lose all our jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It makes sense. And like I said, it allows these smaller countries to be able to arm themselves, defend themselves.
Agreed.
And competition spurs innovation too.
100%.
And because that's one thing we've really noticed is like the military industrial complex has created some really cool shit over the years.
It's true. Not wrong.
But if you look at like the F-35, that plane has been in production for how long? And it's I mean, yes. And it doesn't even work. And you're just like, man, if they had to make that thing work, they would make it work. They've got the smartest people. They got the most money in the world. If they had to do it, they could make it work, but they don't have to. The government's going to buy it anyways. So
correct. That's my point. It's not a free market. That's exactly my point. You're reading me perfectly. I don't mind people doing that, but I want a free market.
You're using a non-libertarian solution to get to a freer market.
Correct. Yes.
And it's kind of the devil's in the details. Like what's the long-term deal? And I like it. And I'm at the point in my life, I think either every country on earth should have nukes or no country on earth should have nukes, because it's the ultimate deterrent. And
but the reality of it is, no, I want to go one step further. This is also, in my view, is a libertarian answer. Countries should have nukes if they want to have nukes. That's it. Some countries don't want it. They don't want that responsibility. They don't want that. They would rather have a treaty with somebody else. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. You should defend your nation as you see fit.
Right.
Like, look, the Japanese did a great job. The Japanese spend hardly any money on their defense, right? And they just keep some bases in their country, which they help pay for, so they don't have to have a nuclear arsenal. A nuclear arsenal is both expensive in dollars, expensive in upkeep, and Japanese people, for obvious reasons, do not like nuclear weapons. So now you also got your population going, what are you doing putting nukes in our land? Haven't we learned our lesson before? Like, so you have all those problems. So the Japanese are like, no, we'll just have a deal with the US. We don't want nukes. So I think each country should defend itself as it sees fit, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, and going back to like the founding documents and arguments, like you can go back to Washington's farewell address when he says, don't get in entangling alliances, particularly in Europe. And I think that's, looking over the course of history, the treaty with the Japanese was a great deal. That mutual defense there, I don't really have much of an issue with it. Europe has brought us Stalin, Hitler, all the Eastern Bloc puppets, Franco, Mussolini. Like Europe doesn't have a great track record in the 20th century, and
it's not like the Asians have done any better.
No, that's true. That's true.
They brought us Mao. I mean, Pol Pot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they've done much better.
That's true.
What I'm saying is just because I think America should be in no defense treaties, but just because I say that doesn't mean other countries won't. Many countries love having treaties, right?
Yeah.
Do you think the British Empire wouldn't love to use its nuclear umbrella as a way to grow its empire again? Of course they would.
They would.
They would love to make a deal with Singapore or something and say, we'll nuke people in defense if you give us some special trade deal or let us fly your flag over your country or some shit. Of course they would do that. Yeah. And you know what? Let them.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. They can do their own thing.
100%.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly we went back to being real friendly with the Brits after the revolution. You know, it's they another country doesn't have a real great track record in the long scheme of things, but um no, it's a crazy world we live in today, but I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
The
One of
question
the
is, and here is our biggest problem before with you.
Mhm,
People are in trouble, you know it. You talk about farmers, they're in trouble too.
mhm,
People in the city, we're all in trouble. The problem we have is there's basically three different types of people trying to give an answer.
mhm.
The left, the right, libertarians. Who actually has an answer? Sadly, the left does.
Yep.
It's a terrible answer. It's more government and socialism. That's their answer.
Mhm.
It's a bad answer, but it's an answer.
Uh-huh.
And when you're in trouble, people take any hand that they can get. It's why so many people shift left when they're in trouble, because the left does have an answer. The right's answer often is bootstraps, cut taxes. That's their answer. Bootstraps,
Mhm.
cut taxes. And if
Shall
you're
not
in
be
trouble,
infringed. Yeah.
yes, you don't want to hear that when you're in trouble. When you're in
Right.
trouble, you want to hear, I care about you, equality. Oh, the left message sounds really good when you're in trouble. So people
Oh,
go
man.
towards the left. Sounds great.
Yeah. It's really wild when so I grew up about a half hour from what's been determined like the geographic center of the Dust Bowl back in the day. My grandpa farmed there, and
Okay.
it's a tough place to live.
I can
Those
imagine.
those New Deal policies, like they cut right to the heart of work in America. It was everybody wants a job, and so it was a government
Right.
job, but at least they were working, you know, and
That yes.
there was something to that mentality that still made a man because
Yep.
it's a government job, but I'm working for my money,
Yep.
and
Agreed.
they were terrible policies, but the messaging was on point.
100%.
The and it there was a whole generation of just New Deal Democrats in very conservative part of the world,
Yep.
and they still I mean that bled through and you know in my generation as well. Like there's like there the whole farming community, like particularly since like the 70s, I mean they're all on the big government tit. Like
Yeah.
there's it's all so subsidized. I mean there's farmers that, I mean, it almost makes them angry that they have to go harvest a crop rather than just collecting an insurance payment on it. You know, they have to actually break out the combine and go through the motions of harvest. And just, well, they're actively hoping for their crops to fail. You know,
Yep.
and that's what the subsidy program has led to. You know, we saw it in the early days of the pandemic where it was something like 50,000 hogs that they had to just put down because they had no processing capacity. And you're like, there has got to be a better way than just slaughtering 50,000 pigs that aren't
Right.
going to be consumed. Like, have a fire sale. Like,
Have a fire sale. I like that.
you know, I work with majority Mexican guys that I've worked with and have for most of my professional career. And I guarantee you, and people can say it's prejudiced or racist to say it or whatever, but if you put a flyer up in the Mexican community and say like hogs are $50 a piece, like, man, everybody's going to be having a quinceañera that weekend. There are going to be so many damn parties, and who cares if your only other choice is to just put them down and throw them in a hole? Let somebody get some use from them. And
Well, the problem you have is, you know, what you hit it perfectly, right? There are two parts you hit perfectly. The first one was when we were in trouble, the only answer that people could hear was, here comes government to write you a check.
yeah,
Now, that does seem good when you're in trouble. And I agree. Look, if I was in trouble, I would have taken a check too. I'm not sitting here high and mighty like I wouldn't have taken a check. I would have taken it too. I'm
Yep.
in trouble. I got to feed my family. Here's a government job. I'm taking the job. I'm just being forward. I think most people would do that, right? We got to feed our families, pay our bills. I'm not mad at somebody for that. I get it. Our problem is our society, our culture didn't have another answer. That's the problem. We had no other answer. That was the one that was there. That's the one that people took. But here's the problem with government. Government programs never end. So once they're there, they now control you. What I would say is what I've been talking about forever. There should be sunset laws on rules on every single law, on every single program, and that should be 6 years. Every single law, every single program ends in 6 years unless it is redone completely. It ends in 6 years. Done. If people know that, they can act accordingly. Societies can step up. The problem is once you've been in a government seat for a certain period of time, that becomes your culture. That becomes who you are. That's how you work. I see it in rural, and I also see it in urban communities. You made a valid point. Your point was, well, look, I'd rather not even work. I'd rather just get my check. Imagine if, and this has happened now for generations in certain parts of many cities, certain areas, and also now in certain rural areas in the quote trailer park areas, if you know what I mean, the poor white areas and the poorer black areas. You now have a generation of people who are now raised, and they've never seen their parents go to work. Like they've never seen it. That's never happened. They've never watched their parents go to work. Imagine how you would be as a human being now, and anyone watching or listening to this, if you had never seen not only your parents go to work, but you never saw your uncles and aunts go to work. You never saw your grandparents go to work. If you never experienced people getting up in your family and going to work, how would you think about it? How would you act? How would you feel? There is now a generation, a chunk of this generation now that has gone through that. Yeah. And that's because the government has said, you don't have to. It's not required. And now socialists who are all about this have said, see, why go work for the man? That's capitalist. Capitalism is bad. Capitalism is exploitative. Capitalism destroys you. That's what they all tell you. Meanwhile, laying on your ass, not doing anything, that's destroying you. Right. Yeah. You have no sense of purpose either. And that's why, and then, so then they get wrapped up in these left-wing ideologies because that's the only purpose they have in life. And 100%. Yeah, it's really crazy. And it's, I don't know. Our job has to be to give them other answers. Our job, if we want to change, is to give them another answer. Yes, and someone might say, Larry, it's not my job to give someone else an answer. Okay, it doesn't have to be, but then you're going to watch all your neighbors turn into socialists, right? That's your other option. And if you're okay with that, no worries. You're okay with that. You're not required to. That's absolutely true. I'm saying it is my opinion. You should. That's all I'm saying. My opinion is you should. You don't have to. If you don't want to, great. You're going to watch all your neighbors become socialists. I see it in New York City all the time. New York City right now is 6-1 Democrat to Republican. 6-1. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse. Yeah. It was funny when we met there in Memphis. I'd spent a little bit of time in New York City. And I mean, I graduated. It's an amazing place to visit, guys. If anyone listening, I wouldn't live here. I do live here and I regret it. You don't have to live here, but visiting is amazing. It's a great place to visit. Yes. There's a reason it's still considered one of the greatest cities that the world has ever seen. But 100%. I graduated with a class of 19 people. It was in a town of about 400 people, I think, total. Little bitty, like less than a speck on the. There were more people in my graduating class than in your entire town. Yeah, exactly. And yes, one of the craziest things I can remember, like the first time I saw like a crosswalk light change and just like hundreds of people at the same time crossing the street, if not thousands, in both directions. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, where do all these people go? Like, what do they do? Where? Right. And it's just wild, because I'd go
I'd turn out of the driveway at home and I'd say, well, there's Terry. He's headed down south to check his cows. And there's only a handful of people that you'd see every day. And what you
right.
knew what they were where they were going and whatnot.
Right.
And then just one crosswalk in street corner in New York, and there might be 2,000 people that cross all at the same time, and yet it just blew my mind. I don't even know where. I don't know anybody there, but let alone what the hell are they doing? What do they do for a job?
Something to remember here, right? In New York City, and again, New York City is the largest city in America by far. It's not even close, right? By far. It's more than twice as big as Los Angeles, the second largest city that we have. That is how big the city is. The metro area has about 16 million people in it. So just New York City with 8 million has more people than about 40 states.
Yeah.
There are more people in the Bronx than there are in Wyoming. Like that, right? That's just 1 out of 5 boroughs that we have. We have 5 boroughs in the city. That's one. Brooklyn, our largest borough, has 2.3 million people in one borough. And there are some parts of Manhattan that density is 30 to 40,000 people per square mile.
Oof.
That's correct.
Wow.
We literally live on top of each other. Yes. Everything you said is true. Yes.
But I also think for guys like me and people that grew up in rural America, like I think it's important to go to New York City. I think it's important to go into Chicago, LA, and see how the majority.
No, Chicago, no LA, New York City, none of other cities. There's only. I'm going to be a little biased here. There's 3 cities you should go to, and this is why I'm going to be biased, if I may. New York, Boston, Philly. Those are the 3. Why? Because those are old East Coast cities that existed in the 1600s.
Port cities too.
Yes, and they're cities that existed in the 1600s. They were all part of our Revolutionary War. They all have a rich history of America in it. You can all get the real rich history of America in those 3 cities: Boston, New York, Philly. If you want to do a tour of urban America, my totally biased view is those 3 cities. New York, number 1. New York, Alexander Hamilton is literally buried here, right?
Yeah.
You can see Wall Street, which is where the wall was when the Dutch still owned it. It was New Amsterdam. That's exists in New York City. Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building. That's all New York City. It's an old city with an old history. Boston too, and Philly, but they're not as cool as New York City. So I know I'm biased, but I think everybody should go visit these cities. The UN is even in New York, right?
Yeah.
We don't realize in New York City, 1/3 of people born in New York City aren't born in the country. I'm sorry, in New York City aren't born in New York City, aren't born in the country. 1/3 of people in New York City also aren't born in New York City. So most people who are in New York City aren't from New York City.
Yeah.
It is very common for us to say, where are you from? Because we assume you're not from here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's and it's crazy, like the sheer amount of different languages you hear walking down the street in New York as well. It's it's an amazing place. I'd never want to live there, but I haven't been. Last time I was in New York was it was a month to the day before the planes hit the towers, because I was on.
Wow.
I can't remember which tower I was on the top of, but it was August 11th of 2001. I was at the top of the
before
World
they
Trade
went down.
Center. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm glad I did, but boy, that was a creepy feeling when I saw him hit. I was like, "Ooh, I was just there," I was just there.
Yes,
and it's crazy, but no, I think it's an amazing city. I've never had a chance to go to Boston. I've been down the East Coast a little bit and up to Massachusetts, but I've never been to Boston, never been to Philly. But I've heard the same thing from.
Yes, Philly has a lot of great history also, particularly Revolutionary War history. A lot of it, right? Ben Franklin was there. It was our first capital was Philadelphia, right? So it's the Continental Congress was in Philadelphia. So there's a lot of very interesting stuff in Philly too for those people who like history or things like that. And the old town is still very much similar to what it was back then. So there's a lot of cool things in Philly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess we got about 20 minutes left here before I let you go.
I'm sorry, we didn't talk about farms at all. We're sitting there yapping about stuff, brother. I'm sorry.
I know. It's all right. And I was gonna say before we do get out of here, I wanted to hear kind of your platform as when you were running for governor. Are you planning on running again?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get ballot access for the party in 2024 because New York State decided that we don't deserve to be a party anymore. So they got rid of my party status. So,
That's
yes, common thing. For those who are listening or watch, you don't know, Democrats and Republicans have completely rigged the system against third parties that there's no tomorrow. And parties are not in the Constitution. They are literally not there. Whatever the parties are doing right now is literally unconstitutional. And there's not a judge who would say that's true. They'll just ignore it and go, no, because they're all part of the same system. Nothing they're doing is correct. In fact, what people don't realize is they didn't used to print ballots. That wasn't the thing. You walked in on a sheet of paper, wrote down who you voted for, and put it in the ballot box. You could vote for anybody. There was no such thing as it being on a ballot and you could only check this person and it was only counted if it was an official party. That shit's made up by parties. You're supposed to be able to vote for whoever you want to vote for, however you want, and your vote counts. Those days are long gone. So forget that. But anyway, my point being, I'm going to try to get ballot access in 2024 so I can run again in 2026. The Republican Party sued me off the ballot in 2022, so I couldn't get on. And in 2020, the Democratic Party threw me off, destroyed my party. So both sides screwed me over. The Democrats destroyed me in 2020. Republicans destroyed me in 2022. So I get equal opportunity smacked. But let me bring up, if I could, the issue that I bring up with farmers in New York State. Several things I want to do this to help farmers in New York State, because you brought up farmers. The first one is I want to create a law that is actually right now in Wyoming, if I'm not mistaken. It's a law that states that if you want to sell your product or service only in New York State, you are immune from all federal regulatory bodies. We should do that for all businesses, and we should treat small farms like businesses in every way. The state should recognize a farm as a small business. They should title it as such. Why? Now they can get SBA loans. They can get investment a lot easier. Makes everything easier than most farmers having to put their farm up for collateral and then lose their farm in 5 or 10 years. And in New York State, you have a lot of farms that have literally been, in a family for 6 or 7 generations, sometimes longer. And then all of a sudden those get lost. No, treat them like businesses, allow them to do that. Why does that matter? Number one, it then allows them to sell their products on a farm stand if they want to. And in New York State, that's a thing. People drive to New York State and want to buy farm fresh products. They want to buy raw milk, which legally you can't do in New York State, right? But you should be able to. Why not? I don't care. Are you selling across borders? No. Then why do I care about federal regulations? As long as you label your product as raw milk and people know it's raw milk, if you want raw milk, drink it. I don't care. Who am I to tell you what kind of milk to drink, right? Not just that. It assists with farm to table. Now our farmers can have direct connections with restaurants to directly connect farm to table without anyone being involved. Not just that. You mentioned the idea of pigs being slaughtered. If you're a farmer, the federal government decides who slaughters what, how they slaughter them, by what price, all that stuff. Well, if you're just going to sell in New York State, that doesn't bother you. If you want to slaughter your pigs your own way, you want to slaughter them at a local butcher, you do what you want. You don't have to now compete with the big farmers. The big mechanical farmers across New York State, they're killing the small farmers. They're forcing farmers who don't want to become Monsanto farmers to become Monsanto farmers because they can't survive without becoming a Monsanto farmer. And again, I'm not against you choosing to be a Monsanto farmer. That's on you. You do you. But I don't want to make it to where you have no choice. Right. That's my issue. If you choose to do that, I'm fine with that. But that should not be your only choice. And it's becoming people's only choice. But I'm still not done. We should allow them, particularly in New York. We are a huge dairy in New York. Dairy's massive in New York State. And right now, our dairy farmers are price takers and not price makers because the federal government buys all the goddamn milk for the price the federal government decides. I'm not necessarily against that, again, as long as that's optional. Right now, it really isn't. I want our local dairy people to be able to act as small businesses and to make craft items like craft yogurts and craft cheeses and, whatever, craft milk product, craft ice creams, whatever the farmer wants to make. And now they can make these products. Now you might go, Larry, wow, a lot of farmers don't want to do that. No worries. Only some will. And whatever farmers decide to do that, that's less milk on the market, which means by default, a higher price for those people who want to be price takers. So the price takers will get more because the price will go up. and the price makers will decide to sell you whatever, ice cream or milk. I mean, raw milk or whatever they want to sell. Again, I'm the governor. I don't decide what you sell. It's your farm. Sell what you want to do. But it's a second piece on top of this. It allows farms to be treated like businesses. So now families will stay together. Very often when it comes to farming families, you find people within the family not wanting to be a farmer, which is fine. Everybody wants to be a farmer. Someone wants to be an operations person or a marketing person or an HR person. Great. If the farm is a business, you can keep your family members there doing other things that are business-like and not farm-like. You can now expand as your family needs to expand. I'm by default supporting the family. I'm hopefully keeping people on the farm because now, say, Johnny doesn't want to be a farmer. Okay, Johnny, what do you want to do? I want to sell stuff. Great. We're making craft cheeses. Go sell it. Oh, okay, great. Johnny goes over and sells the craft cheeses. Who cares? Whatever. Now I'm keeping them on my farm.
Yeah. So, and kind of along those same terms, I interviewed this. He's a history professor from Chicago, and he's a Chicago guy, just like you're a New York guy. He's he's a child of, or I guess the grandson of Polish immigrants that came over in the early 20th century. And he wrote a really excellent book on the Union stockyards and how it put like that act alone really put Chicago on the world map was the packing industry and the stockyards.
Yep.
And it also created like this really unique bond between rural and urban because your rancher would have to follow his cattle into Chicago or Kansas City or Fort Worth or wherever the big city, and they'd have to sell their cattle at the to the different buyers. And now, it's a completely different market. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I think there's something really impressive about being able to kill and butcher 5,000 head of cattle a day. There's something really impressive about that. But it's just as it's like any corporation, the bigger it gets, just like the less of a soul it has to it. It's just like it becomes more just numbers based. And
but again, to be forward, Matt, I'm not against that idea. I'm against when it becomes a monopoly and the only option.
That's exactly right.
It's becoming that. Right. And there's a lot of people, and I know this. I live in New York City. I know there are people who literally are looking what's organic, what's from a local farm, and they will pay the extra dollars it takes happily, eagerly to make sure that stuff is locally taken care of and organically. But that's so hard. That should be easier. And that's my point. Look, will the average person care about whether something's locally grown or organic? No, the average person doesn't. They go to Walmart and they buy whatever's there. That's fine. Again, I don't mind. But there is absolutely a market for people who want to support local farmers. I see it upstate New York. I see it in an example I'll give you is breweries. New York State got smart and finally said, we're going to stop hammering our alcohol industry. We're going to let the breweries do some stuff. There are local breweries in New York State that they make all their money, almost all from New Yorkers. New Yorkers who literally go to a bar and say, I can get my, my Coors Light for X dollars, or I can drop $2 extra to get a local beer. I'll take the local beer. I want the local beer. And they pay an extra $1 or $2 for a beer because it's local, and they do it all the time because they want to. There is a market for that. There absolutely is.
Well, and they'll a lot of those breweries and stuff, they will, whether it's a sales pitch or not, or if they truly mean it, but they'll tell you why it's better than Coors Light. And and if they're good enough, they make you want to drink it anyways, and so like I'm a big fan of like local coffee shops, local breweries, all that. And I'm a rural guy, it was a big thing. We lived an hour and a half from the nearest Walmart. So like it was kind of a big thing when you went to town to even go to Walmart. Like getting KFC was a treat for us, and that's that's like one of the shittiest fast foods out there. But for us, it was an hour and a half and when my mom would bring home a bucket of KFC, like that was a pretty cool evening for us.
Absolutely.
And, but also we had steak 4 or 5 times a week because we raised our own beef too. And so
right.
That was when I went to college. When I'd go home and then I'd bring back a cooler full of beef that we raised, and my city roommates were like, "Oh, this is kind of awesome." And well, you can buy some, you know, like that.
Yes,
We've always
right,
got
right, right,
cattle.
right.
We can always buy or sell some to you. And that was one of the really cool things that come about due to the pandemic, or I guess in spite of the pandemic, but it was the
Better. I
pandemic.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was all kind of spurred by this disaster that we had. But all of a sudden, the meat cases are empty, and we got this little deal called social media, and there's a bunch of farmers and ranchers like, hey, I got beef, I got pork,
Right. Yes.
I
Yep.
got chicken, you know, and that was one of the better things that could have ever happened to the agriculture community. Whether, I mean, it was obviously a bad deal, the whole pandemic thing, but
No, I get it. But there were some silver linings. I think you're right. There were
right.
some. There were.
And it like there was a little bit of commingling of urban and rural there for a slight minute, and you're like, that's not a bad thing. Like, you know, we don't have to understand each other completely, but
correct.
Like, I don't know, I always use this scenario, like growing up for me, we didn't have any black people where we lived. Like, when you saw somebody from Southeast Colorado see a black person in real life for the first time, it's pretty easy to go like, oh, that's a racist son of a bitch. And like, it wasn't racist. It's just like, it was like seeing, you know, a zebra at the zoo for the first time. You know, it's kind of the same, because you're like, oh, that actually, black people do exist. You know, I've only ever saw them on TV. And who we knew black people were athletes, rappers, and thugs. That's all we saw on TV, and that's the only thing we knew about the black community in general was what we saw on TV. And so overall, it wasn't a great look that they that they give African American black folks on the national media. But I know a ton of those same people that once they actually got around other cultures, they're like, oh, they're just people, you know, different people, but they're just
integration. Voluntary integration is the answer for everything. No question. It's why, you know, I was talking about public housing, right? Public housing in most states is a disaster. There's some states who do it decent, but no one does it well. Some do it decent, most are terrible. New York City's are terrible. I mean, they're embarrassingly terrible. So what I was saying is you want to shift this into a rent to own concept, where every public housing is shifted into rent to own. What do? I now encourage private companies to create rent to own properties in the public housing sector. Why? Because if I do that, when they sell it, New York State will take that company that bought it and say, when it's totally sold, all the money comes out, no taxes. No taxes if it's public housing rent to own. People go, wait a minute, you're now giving a tax break to the wealthy. No, I'm paying the wealthy to give housing to people. That's what I'm doing. So the wealthy are now building houses and taxpayers aren't. That's what I want. So I give them a break so they build housing. Why does that matter? Because when poorer people start owning homes, several things happen. Some of them won't want to own. That's fine. That it's voluntary. Some will. As they begin to own, those people get an ownership mindset. Maybe I could own something else. Maybe I should do this. They'll start passing their wealth down. All those things start happening. But not just that. They may decide to sell their home and move to a better place. They may decide to rent their place out. They may decide not to. Gentrification goes away. Gentrification is only a problem for renters. It's not a problem for owners. Owners love gentrification. So now if I'm an owner, gentrification comes in, the value of my home now is going up. Do I want to sell it? Do I want to rent it? Do I want to Airbnb it? I can make decisions on what I want to do. But what winds up happening is now different people own, different people stay, different people sell, and you begin to integrate not only by ethnic background, but also by socioeconomic background. You have to integrate. As people integrate, what you said is exactly true. They become normalized, right? The reason why people don't like this group or that group, because they haven't met this group or that group, right? But now you start meeting these people and go, oh, okay, yeah, they speak a little different than me, but man, they're just like me. They have same problems, issues, concerns, worries. They got to pay their bills. They got family problems like I do. All the same thing. They just speak differently because they have a different ethnic background. That's it.
It's one of the funniest things is you'll hear some old cowboy be like, I had this Korean barbecue the other day. Man, you would not believe, and it's little things like that. And you're like, that guy probably doesn't have the same views on race that I do, but he's just something like that. You're like, yeah, get out and experience the world a little bit. And
Absolutely.
you see that like people are just people. There is good and shitty people regardless of class,
Absolutely.
race, and everything. And I
And
still,
in the long run, we just want to be better. All of us just want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So, and did you watch that mock trial where they put open borders on trial? I
didn't
Freedom
see that.
Fest?
No.
It was pretty interesting, and I'm not really on. I get the open borders argument with a huge caveat. Like, yeah, I agree with them with a huge caveat that you can't have a welfare system if you're going to have open borders. But it's I work in a not so glamorous part of the agriculture world. I'm a feedlot cowboy, sure. And I can tell you that Mexicans aren't taking your jobs because
no, I know that. Yes,
Mexicans are the only ones that show up.
Situation. I have a similar situation here in New York City, but it's not in the farming industry. It's in the hospitality and restaurant business.
Mm-hmm.
Same concept.
Yeah. Well, who shows up to get that job? It's poor immigrants. That's the way it's always been. The way it's always been is the poor immigrants. They take the jobs that the Americans that have been here for a while don't want. They just
100% true.
They're not taking that job unless it comes down to their last option. But there's always that government option, so they don't take the shitty job that nobody wants. But Pedro or Mohammed or somebody else will take it, and because they know what real poverty looks like.
The point I've brought up in the past is we make a dichotomy that doesn't exist. We say, "What do you want? Open borders or not?" That's insanely dumb. That's not the right way of looking at it. You can have vibrant immigration and a secure border. You can do both. Now, how do I know that? Because I've already come up with a plan. I've had it for 5 years. No one picks it up because they don't want to solve the problem. What they want to do,
it's a wedge issue.
Bingo. Keep it a wedge issue. Why would I fix it? Let me tell you what the plan is. We need to have 2 Ellis Islands on the southern border. Both of these Ellis Islands are private companies. All the government does is lease the land. That's all the government does. The government leases the land, says private company, you control it. What kind of company? A recruiting company. There are tons of them. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They already know how to do it. They literally create a large facility that can house thousands upon thousands of people. I'm not joking. They just build it. They can build it. If we let them go, they'll build it in a year.
Have the Mirage build it. Have one of those casinos make it.
Whatever. It could be done. They'll knock it out in a year. So now what does that mean? If you want to come to our country legally, go to the Ellis Islands. One of them. You pick the one you want to go to. 2 separate companies. So if one company's bad, they'll go to the other one. This company won't make any money. It'll go under. The market forces will affect it, right? So you make sure that you have 2 separate companies. People go there. And then they vet you. Do you have a disease? Are you a criminal? Whatever the case may be. You're not? Great. You stay there for whatever is the appropriate time, 14 days, 21 days, whatever the time is. I don't care what it is. They keep you there. Then they give you an orange card, and they can go to any state that opts it. If a state wants to opt out, they may. I don't know what state would opt out. I think it'd be stupid. But if they want to, they can. The state can opt out if it wants to. Otherwise, it goes to a state where they want to work, and they get a 2-year visa to work. Now they can pay their taxes. They're legal for 2 years. There are 2 rules for this. Number 1, they may not take any form of public assistance. And 2, they must check in every 2 years. That's actually from DACA rules, believe it or not. Keep those same rules that we're working at for DACA. Keep those rules here now. Then that works. If the person takes any a public assistance, gone. They don't check in 2 years, gone. But here's the good thing. You now can create a rule or for them to get some form of green card. Is it a 10-year plan, a 15-year plan? I don't care what the plan is. You make a plan for citizenship eventually, whatever that plan is. They have to pass a test or whatever. I don't care. Come up with a thing. They check in 5 times in a row for 10 years and show they haven't got a criminal record. We pick the rules. Now, why does that matter? Because one of the biggest problems people say is, well, Larry, they're skipping the line. It's a separate line. The private company's doing it. So the company's making money off of this. They're making money like recruiters do for placing. So taxpayers aren't paying any dollars. They're making money with all the extra services. Oh, you want an extra orange card. You want a green card. You want test prep so that you can pass your citizen test. They get all the money for people paying to get that. They make money on that system. Now, let me keep going further. That means that people who are here illegally could literally go, you know what? I'm going to go get legal. You don't have to come from the country. You could just be someone in Philadelphia and go, you know what? I'm going to go get legal. I'm tired of being illegal. They can go to these places also. You can open up multiple Ellis Islands. You can start to legalize our, yes, turn Alcatraz into one. Perfect. You could literally have people voluntarily legalize themselves. Now, why does that matter? There are bad people crossing the border. There are bad people in our country right now. There are bad people. Those people exist. But guess what? None of them will go to the Ellis Islands because they're bad people. So now the current people that we have on the border who are playing babysitter could instead be going after the bad guys and catching them. And I'll go one step further. Those that are already here, we can't catch them. We don't have enough time, money, or energy to catch them. And why? Because they're sitting in little little enclaves of other people who are undocumented and illegal. They're not going to tell on them. But what if all of a sudden half of people are legal? Well, they can just call the cops for help. So now when the cops come by and say, hey, good Pablo, where's bad Pablo? Right now he runs away because he's scared. But once it's legal, he goes, oh, bad Pablo? He's right there. Go get him, cops. Now we can go get bad Pablo. We can catch the bad guys and keep the good people and work here legally paying taxes without going on public assistance. You could absolutely do that. You could start that within a year. We won't ever do it.
And honestly, it's like the best scenario of a self-licking ice cream cone for that company, because you never have a problem of staffing your facility because you have a wave of migrants that, and maybe it's constantly, and maybe they're only there for 2 weeks, but guess what? If it's all like lower level jobs, you don't have to really train them. And it's a good deal for them because they can work it off their bill and they don't have to go to a coyote who might sell them in the sex trafficking.
Yes, absolutely. And that's my point. People say, how are they going to pay for it? They're paying coyotes now.
Yeah.
Don't pay the coyote.
And a company with a well-run, efficient facility like that, they can undercut the shit out of the coyotes.
100%. Absolutely true.
Yeah. And when they walk out of there, they can meet with an immigration official right there with their folder of all the shit that's been vetted by a company. It seems like a great solution.
Yes.
Will
and
it
again,
get implemented?
I've been talking about it for literally 5 years.
Yeah, I remember hearing it on, I forget which podcast I first heard it on, but I was like, that's a really good idea. And if we're probably still going to have these bureaucrats around, well, do your job and you can tour these facilities. And if they're not doing something wrong, you can find the shit out of them.
Absolutely.
Revoke 100%. Their lease and give their facility to somebody else. It's
100%.
It keeps
authorize more leases for more companies to compete.
Exactly. And it keeps them honest. I think that's, I've never been able to go into the full anarchy mindset, because I think that's just as much of a utopian idea as communism or socialism. I think it's 100%. A better it's a better utopian idea. But I'm more of a Thomas Paine. Government in its best form is a necessary evil, and in its worst, unbearable tyranny. But I think it is a necessary evil. And what maybe not even a necessary. I think it's just an inevitable evil. Is like governments will form whether we want to or not.
You have to have a cultural change before you could make anything else change. A lot of libertarians will scream and yell about, everyone hates taxes. And I'm like, that's not true. I live in New York City. there are a lot of New Yorkers and people across the country, but I know New Yorkers who still believe that the only way to having a good society is through taxation. They can't imagine another answer. And it's our job to show them that there are other answers. And until we do that, they are always going to believe, no, there's no other option. It's only taxes. They can't imagine anything else. And again, I say it all the time. We have to be better at getting them to understand that there are other options, other choices. We just haven't been that good at it, to be forward with you. We haven't been that good at it.
No, I think that's right. And no, you're 100% right that people like tax. I mean, California votes new taxes upon themselves all the time. All the time.
Yes.
I live about 20 minutes from the California border. Like we're on the border of good California where it's kind of normal California. People.
I like that.
But like, like even if you listen on the radio, you'll hear ads about California, or it's like on podcasts, even geolocated ads. So you'll get a bunch of political ads about this new tax that's going to solve everything and
solve it all.
I listened to it and I was like, God, how is anybody dumb enough to vote? But they do. They overwhelmingly pass it every time. And you're just like, well, I mean, the only thing I can think of is they actually believe that shit. And
they do.
And how you make them not believe it, I don't know, but it's it's crazy that people truly believe that like taxes are like it's your civic duty. And
yes. And they can't imagine. What did I always say? It's the price to pay for civilization. They can't imagine anything else. Yes.
Yeah, I know it. And it's insane particularly when you look at the states with no state income tax. So Nevada's. Yes. I mean, that's a big reason why I'm living in Nevada now.
That's why I was thinking about going to Tennessee.
I
was thinking about Tennessee. I was.
Memphis was pretty cool. I really enjoyed Memphis.
I like Chattanooga. That's kind of my spot.
I've got a friend that lives over there by like Knoxville, I think is where they're at. They're from Vermont originally, and they just moved to the Knoxville area. They're starting a new homestead.
Nice.
But a ton of people moved to Florida. Like Vegas keeps getting bigger. Which is, I mean, it's good and bad because 2/3 of Nevada's population is in Clark County, Vegas area.
Wow.
And
I had no idea.
So
a lot.
Yeah, so and Nevada's a big state geographically. Sure. I mean, it's huge, and so there's a lot of people that just like, I mean, your vote don't mean a whole lot because it's just it hinges on what Clark County is going to do, and they're pretty fickle. It's a blue collar town, but it's also a union town, and I'm not opposed to unions. Actually, I think that's an untapped resource for a lot of like libertarian and conservative movements. Is like particularly the conservatives, like the Republicans make no bones about it. They are anti-union, and I'm not necessarily pro-union, but man, that's a powerful force in this country that like the right, kind of the right of center people have like they just wrote it off, kind of how they've wrote off the black community too. Like they're never going to vote for us, and I don't know. But I don't know. You see folks like you and Maj Toure doing the Lord's work, and
we keep trying.
Maj said it best. He's like, you need the hood, and,
yes.
And that's true.
I always say something else, right? Remember, most of the country is left, right? Most of the country is left. There's more Democrats than Republicans.
Yep.
Most of the country is left. That's the reality of it.
Yep.
If we cannot convert the left, we cannot change the country, which is why I spend so much time talking to the left. We have to convert the left. And my example that I think is the best one is another black person, Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, Thomas Sowell is amazing.
And he used to be a Marxist.
Yeah.
So he came from the left. And he's one of our best minds that we have in the liberty movement. And he was a Marxist. So look, the left can be converted. And the thing I say is people who hear that often can't believe it. Say, no, remember, Thomas Sowell's brilliant. So how could a guy that smart be a Marxist? Because with the information and experience that he had, that made the most sense to him.
Yeah.
Until finally he got different experience and different information, and then he changed his mind because he's a smart, savvy guy. There are lots of smart people who are Marxists because we haven't done a good enough job communicating our message to them. So they go, wait a minute, could I be wrong here? We have to be better at that. I'm trying my damnedest to be better at that. If we're better at that, we can turn the left. If we turn the left, we can change this country.
Right. And so like there was we were on the verge of a huge UPS strike here just
I remember,
like last week or something like that. And you know, and that's one thing where like everybody uses UPS. Everybody gets packages delivered from Amazon via UPS. Everybody does. And most people, particularly in rural America, you have the same UPS guy every time. And I'm sure it's different in the cities, but I bet it's pretty similar because they
in the city, one UPS route is one building.
Yeah, so you
That's how
have
big the buildings are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And but
the
but
entire
it's
route is one building.
But I bet most of the time it's the same guy that delivers to that same building.
It is often.
Yeah, so it's and so like we know our UPS guy or gal. And one of the big sticking points in this contract negotiation was air conditioning in the trucks. And I remember, as a regular person, you're just like, all right, you assholes can put an AC in your truck like that. Like you guys can afford that. I know you can. And so like it makes sense. Like that's kind of one of the good things about the unions is they can get on a bullhorn and bitch about how they don't have AC in the truck, and normal people me and you
let me be
like,
very clear. I'm not upset about unions at all. Unions are just the First Amendment. It's freedom of speech and freedom of association. What I don't like is when government monopolizes unions and public sector unions who are actually negotiating not with their own. You can fix public sector unions in a very simple way. There's two things to deal with unions. One is their political, and it's really one thing, their political power. That's the issue. Their political power is the problem. Now, two pieces to deal with that. Number one, right now, a public sector union will negotiate with the governor or the mayor or the whatever. It's not the governor's money. It's not the mayor's money. They're all on the same side. They're bribing them for votes. That's insanely stupid.
With
all
our money.
Public sector union contracts should be settled by public referendum.
Right.
Negotiate with the people who you are serving. Those are your actual bosses. If you are a public sector union, people go, well, will the people screw them? Why would you? Half the people you know work for the government. You're not going to screw them. You're going to have an actual back and forth. People will probably still vote for most of the contracts, but not in negotiating with the public, not the individuals. And his best part, the union has no need to then buy the politician anymore. It takes that piece out. Second, you pass a very simple law in every state, and that is you may only donate money if you can vote. That's it.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Unions can't give money anymore. They can't PACs because they can't vote. So you've taken now the political aspect out of unions, and unions only do what they're supposed to do, which is support the workers.
Collectively bargaining.
With that. Collective bargain, support your workers. You have a right to do so. Please do so. You should have no political power.
Right. But like one of the big things is like you like where I think the union's important is like you can, like you said, First Amendment rights, like, hey,
100%.
We're delivering your packages and we like it. We like visiting with with Miss Smith down the hall or whatever. I like visiting with Charlie when I drive way out of my way to go drop off his one package a month or whatever.
Yep.
And I think old Charlie wants you to have some air conditioning too. And so you'd be like, hey, like that's the cool thing. And you're like, hey, this UPS deal is they're screwing us. It is hotter than hell in this truck. And I get it's a good way to, I don't know. It just seems like it's an untapped resource for anybody right of center politically.
The problem is most unions are heavily left. The exception of police unions and corrections officers unions. Most of them are heavily left. So if that gets the time. Matt, I'm sorry to do this to you. I got to run, brother.
No, that's all right. Well, I've kept you longer than I promised. But where can anybody find your stuff?
Check me out at Larry Sharpe on all the interweb stuff, everything. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on everything, or X, whatever it's called. I'm on all the things. Check me out at Larry Sharpe, and that's Larry Sharpe with an E, and the E stands for entertaining.
Hell yeah. I enjoyed it very much. So thanks for your time. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
Go check out his stuff. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/burning-daylight, or go check out the merch I got at burning-daylight.com. Once again, Larry, thanks for your time. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright, pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Burning daylight. Well, life is just a gather, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.